succulents need, you've probably heard that succulents need to grow in a well-draining soil. But what does a well-draining soil look like? What does that even mean? And why is it such a big deal for your succulents? That's what I'm going to teach you in today's video. So first off, I want to show you what a well-draining soil looks like. So this is an example of what we call the succulent gritty mix. And this is a pre-mixed bag of soil that I've purchased from bonsaijack.com. They have the highest quality succulent soils and bonsai soils around. They are amazing. And this is actually a formula that was written specifically for succulents. I learned about it on a forum about 10 years ago, and Bonsai Jack was able to produce it in mass so that we can buy it instead of having to create it ourselves. And it is phenomenal. So as you can see, this looks like a bunch of rocks, and that's because 2/3 of it essentially is rocks. So the thing that you want to look for with a well-draining soil is you want to look for large particle sizes. So you can see here, these are not little fine pieces of soil. 2/3 of this is a rock or inorganic material, and then 1/3 of it is actually pine bark fines. Now, the pine bark fines absorb and hold a good chunk of water, as does a product called turfus that is also part of this mix. And those retain water while still maintaining a lot of structure, so the soil doesn't get compacted easily, and it allows for plenty of airflow around the succulent roots. So if you look at a more traditional potting soil, like you would see a succulent purchased at a nursery come in, you can see that this is super compact. There is room, of course it doesn't want to focus, there is room for the roots to flow a little bit in there, but over time that soil gets pressed down and pressed down and pressed down, and it loses kind of the fluffiness or all of that airiness in between all the particles. And that's why having this large particle size is so nice, because it's never going to get compacted. These don't break down over time. The pine bark will a little bit, and granted it will over time, but the rock material in here helps it maintain that nice structure. It allows water to flow through the soil really easily, and it allows the soil to stay wet without being soggy to the touch. So succulents do not like to sit in wet soil for a long period of time, which is why a gritty, well-draining soil is so important, especially if you're growing succulents indoors. Outdoors, succulents are a little bit more forgiving, and you don't have to use a soil that's quite this gritty, but you do still want something that's going to drain well and not compact over time. So if you want to make up a mix like this yourself, what you're looking for is a 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter particle sizes, and then you're looking for 2 inorganic materials. So here we're using a product called turfus and another product called bonsai block that's really similar to crushed granite, which is what I used originally when I was making this mix myself. And then 1/3 is inorganic, and that's where the pine bark fines come in. And you can see these pieces of pine bark are still very small. This is not like bark that you would mulch with or anything like that. Like they are 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter particles, and all mixed together, all roughly the same size. Again, that allows for that soil to be really light, or not light, it's not lightweight for sure, but it's very airy and very porous, and allows the roots plenty of room to grow without being smashed or compressed. And the reason why this is so important is you need the soil to be able to absorb water quickly when it's dry. So something like this, when you pour water on over the top of this, it's just going to run off down the sides because it's so compact. And peat moss especially is what's called hydrophobic when it's dry. It doesn't absorb water very easily. So in order to water something like this, you'd need to pour a little bit of water on, wait a few minutes, pour a little bit more on, wait a few minutes, and just basically let it soak all the way through the center. Now you could also bottom water, where you set this in like a bowl or pot of water and let it absorb all the way up to the top. But over time, this is going to cause problems long term for your succulents unless you're paying really close attention to them. So a great example, or not so great example, depending on how you look at it, is this succulent. I bought it, and I actually did not water this at all after I bought it. I bought these on the same day, same place, And this one rotted within 2 days of when I purchased it. And it's because it was overwatered at the store. There wasn't a lot of light or airflow, and that soil stayed wet and soggy. So even though it looked fine when I first bought it, the soil stayed wet for way too long for that particular succulent, and it ended up rotting really quickly. It wasn't my fault. It was already on its way out when I purchased it, but I couldn't tell for sure from just from looking at it when I bought it. So for your own succulents, try and find a soil that is really gritty and well draining. Now, if you can only shop locally, go find a cactus and succulent mix from a local nursery or hardware store and try to add some sort of amendment to it. You could add crushed granite. So a really great place to find crushed granite is actually at a feed store or animal supply store. They will usually have crushed granite that they use as part of, it's not chicken feed, but they use it with chickens. Anyway, so look for crushed granite there. You could also add in pumice, or you can also get a product that is very, very similar to turfus at an auto supply store. So I think the brand name for it is called Oil Dry, and it's a product that they use to absorb oil spills. So it's just a very gritty material that absorbs moisture, absorbs liquid very quickly. And again, you want to have roughly 1/3 organic material, something that's soft and some sort of like plant-based material, right? So the pine bark fines. And then 2/3 inorganic material, some type of rock. Like you saw there, we had the crushed granite and the turfus together. And if you have a well-draining soil, that is going to be a game changer for you with keeping your indoor succulents from getting overwatered. It will help you maintain really nice colors. It'll help your succulents just thrive. They'll have a really good, healthy root system. They're not going to be as prone to rot. So if you are that person who tends to overwater your succulents, give them a little too much love, in a well-draining soil, they are going to be much, much less likely to rot or have problems with overwatering. So if you already have succulents, go take a look at your soil, see if it's really compact, if it's super organic like a traditional potting mix, or see if it's something that is more gritty. And if it's gritty, you're good to go. If it's not gritty and your succulents are still doing okay, don't make a change all of a sudden. If you're doing okay with what soil you have, just keep using it, but keep an eye out for signs of overwatering. And we're going to talk more about how to water and how to diagnose overwatering in another video. But I just want you to pay attention to what your succulent is doing. And if you start seeing signs of problems, then I recommend repotting and shifting to a gritty soil. Now, if you buy a new succulent, I highly recommend repotting it as soon as you can after purchasing it. One of the reasons being, you can see that this is really root bound. The roots are all tight and really compacted together. When you repot that succulent, it'll allow you to remove all of that organic soil. You can really loosen it up, and you can loosen those roots, and that way water won't get trapped within the roots and end up causing rot. So it's always a great idea to replant your newly purchased succulents. That way you know what type of soil they're in. It's in something that you're going to be used to growing with, and it'll be well draining. Most succulents are not sold in a well draining soil, and part of that is because they're grown in a very climate controlled environment. The growers have this perfect schedule of how they keep them watered, how they keep them alive. It's not going to be the same as your house or your yard. And so switching to something that is more in line with what works for you in your climate is going to be critical to keep those succulents alive. So take a look at your soil, see if something needs to be changed, and then moving forward, make sure you're always using a super well draining and gritty soil for your succulents. All right. I'm hopeful that you guys can hear me okay. I realized today, I guess we'll do a little show and tell. My office also doubles as a 3D print farm. So you've probably seen the last few days I've been talking about our Snappy Pots, and right now we're in the middle of printing some of our new designs. So sneak peek right here. These are some of the new snap decorations that we're going to be doing. And so there's 5 printers running in here with me, and it's a little bit noisy. So hopefully you can hear okay and the background noise isn't too distracting. And I know yesterday I said I was going to be talking about pottery today. I wasn't looking at my notes, and today was soil day, tomorrow's pottery day, and then on Friday we'll be chatting more about water and overwatering and some ways to help you not overwater your succulents. But switching to a well-draining soil is a really, really good first start. So definitely take a look at what you're using, see if you can make some modifications to make it grittier or more well-draining, and your succulents will definitely thank you for that. So it looks like we have a bunch of people on here. I love it. I see some familiar names. I was going to say faces. I guess I'm not seeing faces, but I do see familiar names. So thank you everyone for being here. I'm just going to start going down through the chat, answering questions that pop up. And again, we're going to do a drawing for a Snappy Pots Mystery Box. For one of you that's on live, will win today. Reno won on Monday. He's here again, so thank you for joining. And then just to show you what comes in the mystery box, you'll get 3 snappy pots, 1 in each size. They won't be these exact colors. It's a mystery box. They're going to be random, but you will get 1 of each size. The little 1-inch pots. I should show you actually what these look like planted. The 1-inch pots are my favorite. They're just little, they're perfect for propagating. So here I have like a little crassula tom thumb that I'm growing in one. Oop, doesn't want to focus. And so the 1-inch pots, and then the 2-inch pots, which work perfectly if you get a 2-inch pot from a nursery. You can unpot it, loosen those roots, and you can put it back into a little decorative 2-inch pot. And then the 3-inch pot, which are my personal favorite. They're just big enough that you can combine a couple succulents, but also small enough for one succulent. And I feel like the size is just right, where there's not too much soil, there's not too much plants to worry about, and they're not heavy. Anyway, I'm biased towards the 3-inch size and the 1-inch. The 2-inch are good as well, but the 1-inch are just so adorable. The 3-inch I feel like are the most versatile for most of the succulents that I have. And then also in that mystery box, there's a bunch of different snaps, the little decorations that you can put on your snappy pots. So I just try and pull these out. Anyway, so there's a bunch in here. Some of them are seasonal, some of them are classic varieties. So a mixed bag. You don't know exactly what you're going to get, but there's going to be a lot of fun in there. About $50 worth of product. And if you want to just buy some snappy pots, or if you want to buy a mystery box specifically, we do have some that are available over at snappypots.com. There's also a link in the description if you want to just click through on that. But lots of fun things there. And as you saw, a little sneak peek of things that are coming later this week. So it's going to be fun. All right, let's answer some questions. Okay, Lisa says, what is the name of the app you use? And is it a paid version or free? So the app that I use is called the Succulent Tracker. Here's this little icon. It wants to stay in focus. So little succulent inside a magnifying glass. And it lets you organize your succulents and record when you've watered them. So it doesn't have identification, which a lot of people have asked for. We're working on it. It's a bit trickier than it may seem, but it lets you record when you're watering. It shows you the average number of days since you've last watered. You can record when you have planted repotted a succulent, if you've treated for pests, fertilized, pruned, repot, or you can just add notes to it. You can store the name of your plant in there. You can give it nicknames if you want. You can also keep a photo history, which is fun too. So over time you can see the growth of your succulent in the app. Just a little quick overview. So it's free to use for 5 plants, and then if you want to add more than 5 plants, it is $3 a month or $30 a year. So really nice and cheap for being able to keep everything organized. This has been a lifesaver for me. Let's find out. I have 318 plants. Really it's 318 pots because I have just one picture per pot. And I have come to realize why so many of my succulents have struggled over time is because I don't actually remember when I watered, or I'll think I watered a long time ago and it was just a few days ago, or I'll think I haven't watered. What's the opposite of that? I'll think I just barely watered and it's been like 3 weeks. So that has been incredibly helpful. So yeah, Succulent Tracker. You can go to succulenttracker.com or just search for Succulent Tracker in the App Store. So on Android and on iOS. And there was something else I was going to say about it. I don't remember now. So yeah, Succulent Tracker. I love it. Okay. Reno asks, is it true that you can use cinnamon for root rot and bugs? If so, how do I use or apply it? It doesn't fix root rot. The most common use that I have seen for cinnamon, and I haven't actually tested cinnamon, although I do have a friend who swears by it. So I've used honey, because honey is also another, so cinnamon is a natural, like antifungal, antibacterial, something along that line, as is honey. And so one of the ways that people will use it is when they're taking a cutting. So like if I decide I want to trim up this little crassula, I can cut off the top, and on the end of that cutting you can dip it in cinnamon or cover it with honey, and that is supposed to both stimulate root growth and prevent it from infections or having issues. I don't feel like it has made a huge difference. When I was using honey, I really didn't see an improvement. I also have not really had issues with cuttings either not rooting or getting infected. And so there wasn't a lot to compare it to, but I didn't feel like it was a necessary step. Succulents root really easily from cuttings, but if I would not go the honey route just because it's wet. I would do cinnamon if you want to try something because it's dry. That being said, I don't think it's necessary, but if you just want to take an extra precaution, you can totally do that. Like I said, I don't think it will cure root rot. That just has to dry out, and even then it may not recover. I have heard of people using it as a deterrent for pests. I've not personally tried it though, so I don't have any data to back that up. Generally for pests, I'll just use isopropyl alcohol or a spray called Safer Soap. There's another one that I recommend using only in the worst case scenario called Fertilome. It can be pretty brutal on succulents, but it's also brutal on bugs. And so it does work, but I would start with alcohol and then the Safer Soap. And if for some reason you still can't get rid of that infestation, then go with the Fertilome, which has a neem oil in it, which can ruins that nice farina, the little like powdery coating that's on succulents. You can see on this one it got kind of wiped off. So totally up to you. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I think you can get away without using the cinnamon. But again, it can totally work. Hi, Cheryl. Guys, there's so many people, and this is fun. Thank you guys for all being here. Okay, so Cheryl says, when I buy a plant that is way too wet, I take it out of the pot and take off all the dirt and let it sit out of the dirt and dry off for a day or two. Is this a good idea? Yes. So this one that I showed you, that's it looks dry and crispy now, but it was like disgustingly mushy and wet. If you want to take the safest approach when you're buying succulents from a big box store, which I did with these, I would unpot them and just like you're describing, remove as much of the soil as you can and let it dry out. Then go ahead and pot it up. Again, let it dry for a day after you've potted it. Because when you unpot and repot succulents, it really disturbs and damages the roots. Succulents are really tough. It's not a big deal to be rough with the roots. You can actually rip off most of the roots if you want, and your succulent will still survive. But the important thing is that you let it dry for at least a day so that those roots have time to heal or callus over. If your roots are damaged, you put them in a pot and you water right away, they're a little bit more likely to suffer from root rot or overwatering. So definitely letting it dry out is a good idea. And yes, I would recommend doing that anytime that you suspect a succulent has been overwatered or that it's been in a really organic soil where you don't know how it's been cared for. I think uprooting it and letting it dry out, sitting like you said, is great. Just make sure that when it is sitting out of the soil, that it's somewhere where it does not get any direct sunlight. Direct sunlight on the roots is the fastest way to cause them to dry up. While succulents can survive without any roots, if you leave that plant out, it gets direct sunlight and those roots burn up, it's going to be a little bit trickier to get it reacclimated in a new pot. So I would not take that approach. But yeah, just keep it somewhere with bright, indirect sunlight, really mild temperatures, no extremes with that. So I'd probably just keep it inside under a bright window if you unpot them and let them dry out. Yeah, great idea, great question. Okay, now that it's winter in South Africa, should I wait till spring to repot my new succulents? The short answer is no, / it depends. If you want those succulents to go outside, first I would not plant succulents outside in the winter, especially if you have like a 4-season climate. South Africa, I would imagine, well, I guess different parts would be different, but it's not a problem to repot succulents in cooler weather and in off seasons of the year. But you do have to be really careful with that outdoors. So if you're potting them and planting them inside all year long, you are totally safe, totally fine to do that. If it makes you nervous, you can wait, but I feel like it's better to get them out of the nursery pot, out of the nursery soil, and repotted into something that you're familiar with and have more control over. I have repotted succulents probably every day of the year over the last 10 years that I've been growing them. And I've done that here in Phoenix. I've also done it when I lived in Utah. So I actually had succulents that were shipped to me in the middle of winter, snowing, freezing temperatures, and I brought them inside and I replanted them and kept them inside, and then later moved them outside once it was warmer. So yes, you can repot any time of year, but just keep them inside or in a super, super protected area. You don't want newly repotted succulents out exposed to any extreme in temperature, whether it's summer or winter. But make sure you let them dry after you repot them. Let them dry for a day after you repot them. Okay, what are my thoughts on using leca instead of regular soil? My initial reaction is it's probably fine, but I also just want to make sure that I'm remembering what it is exactly. Hold on a second, let me just look it up. Okay, yeah. So leca, if you're not familiar, is they're called expandable clay pebbles. And I was just going to try and pull up a photo to show you guys, but it is not quite working. Okay, so here's leca. So the biggest issue I would see with leca is possibly the particle size. This one that I just happened to pull up is 8mm pebbles, which actually is probably not bad. It's a little bit bigger than I'd recommend. I think it can work. I don't know why, and this is probably not true, but I feel like the roundness of the pebbles seems really funny to me. But it does work. It does follow that same kind of principle as the grittiness in the soil, and it could work. I've not personally used it, so I can't say like hands down, yes, it will work. But the concept behind it is great, where those the little balls absorb water, but they don't necessarily stay super dry to the touch. I believe they're actually made, well, this is hearsay, but I believe they're made with a product that's very similar to the turfus that I use in my gritty mix. So it should work. One thing that you may run into is, depending on that particle size, it might dry out too quickly. And then if they're smaller particle sizes, it could stay wet too long. I don't know. I think it'd be worth a test for sure. I would say it's probably better to use something like that than a traditional potting soil or even a pre-bagged mix that you might find at like a Lowe's or Home Depot. I feel like succulents can kind of grow in, I hate to say they can grow in anything, but they can grow in a lot of different media, and that I think would probably be a better option than some of the traditional potting mixes. So for sure. Okay, Joe. Hi, Joe. When a newly purchased plant is very root bound, can you remove or cut off roots during the repotting process? Yes, you totally can. And actually, I would recommend it. Something like this. This isn't like crazy root bound, but it is pretty root bound. So with this, I'm gonna make a big mess, which I don't have the right space for right now. But with this, I would squeeze this. I would really loosen it up. This is so hard. And yeah, I'd probably end up breaking off a bunch of the roots, somewhat unintentionally, but I would also break some off intentionally too. Part of that is any sort of stress usually causes succulents to grow or try and save themselves. And ripping off roots a lot of times will encourage new root growth in other areas, which is really what you want. You want your succulent to root in the new planting medium that you have it in. So yes, it's totally fine to do that. I wouldn't rip off all of them. Like if you have a good root system, leave a good chunk of the root system, but absolutely feel free to rip some off. It's kind of fun. I know it scares a lot of people when they first start repotting, but you just get used to it over time, and then it's really nice. You're like, oh, that whole chunk of roots fell off. Oh well, it'll survive. So, yeah. And then I just noticed Joe below says he's been using the Succulent Tracker, and it's been a lifesaver for him and his 413 plus plants. Yes, Joe has been helping us test out some new features with the app too. So, if you have more than a handful of succulents, the Tracker app is, I'm super biased, but it is really, really helpful to just keep track of when everything's watered or when you repot things. And if you rip off the roots, you can like add that to the notes when you record the repotting action in the app, which is awesome. Okay, Cheryl says, when you repot propagation, what soil do you use at first? I don't have one handy, but I typically, let's see. You repot propagation. So when I'm propagating succulents from leaves and really from cuttings, I do this too. So I will generally, if this is my pot and I am growing, let's say I'm starting with leaf propagation. So I'm laying leaves on top of this. I will fill about 2/3 of it with the gritty mix that you saw here. And then the top third, I will put coconut coir. And coconut coir is like shredded up, I can't remember if it's coconut shells or coconut husk or all of the above. Anyway, it's really finely ground up coconut excess. And I like it better than a traditional potting soil with peat moss. It doesn't stay quite as wet and soggy. It dries out faster than a typical potting soil, but it stays wet a lot longer than the gritty mix. So for propagation, I like to use coconut coir on top of a gritty mix, especially if it's something that I know I'm going to be leaving in this pot for a long time. I just realized I have a little propagation pot here. So you can kind of see, come on, there we go. You can kind of see what it looks like. It's just brown and soft. So all of my little itty bitty leaf propagation babies, if I've taken them from a bigger tray and put them into a small pot like this, I'll just use straight coconut coir. If I'm moving them into a bigger pot and I don't feel like they have quite enough of a deep root system, then I'll usually put a layer of gritty mix and then put the succulent in, and I'll cover the roots with coconut coir. It's not perfect, but I have found it allows those roots to get a little bit more water in that early growth stage, and then it still has that nice porous, airy soil that it can grow in later. And water tends to dry out last in the bottom of the pot, so having the well draining soil down here allows this to dry out faster, And then the coconut coir, that top layer, which usually dries out the fastest, does still dry out fairly quickly. So for me, it's a good combination. So I do the same thing with cuttings. Like this one actually I think was a cutting. So I put the gritty mix in here and then a layer of coconut coir, and then in this case I also put a top dressing on it. I'm really curious now. I have one of these and I know for sure was a cutting. I can't remember if it was that one or not, but yeah, so kind of up to you. It depends on the size of the propagation that you're repotting and how much of a root system it has. If something needs more roots, it doesn't have a lot of roots, I will add a little bit of the coconut coir in. It's kind of my, like, I can add, it's kind of my catch-all. I can add it in if I need to, but it doesn't make the soil overly soggy. So, okay. Oh, Kim says, fun fact, crushed granite is chicken food. It helps grind food in their gizzard. Okay, so that's what I thought, and then I was about to say it, but I didn't, I don't want you to quote me wrong. So, yeah, chicken grit. That's why you can buy it at the feed store, because apparently it is chicken feed. Thank you. Kim also asked, what about using vermiculite in soil? I don't think vermiculite is a problem in and of itself, but so this is total anecdotal evidence, which I guess a decent amount of this is, but vermiculite tends to break down really quickly. It doesn't tend to maintain a lot of structure. So I wouldn't say like absolutely not, never use it. But if you can find something else, I'd probably use something else instead as an amendment. I've just seen a number of people who've used vermiculite and ended up not having great results. But that said, I have not personally used it. So, and I haven't done a ton of research into it. So take that with a grain of salt. Oh, Cheryl also loves the Succulent Tracker app. Thank you. Not meant to be a promotion for that, but glad you guys love it. I don't know how. Bass S says diatomaceous earth works to get rid of mites. It's organic. Use the food grade. It works for everything. White powder on succulent for 24 hours, then brush off with a soft makeup brush and sprinkle it in the soil. Yeah, so diatomaceous earth is just like ground up rock essentially, and that is great advice. You can put it in the soil. It works really well actually to get rid of slugs or snails, which love succulents. So putting it on the soil is a deterrent for them. I didn't know though about like putting it on the plant, but that makes sense also to brush it off. You don't want to leave it on your succulent for a long time. So, okay. I'm going to go with one more question and then we'll finish up. So Eli says, I just got a new succulent from a non-garden store. Is there anything I should do right now to prevent it from dying? The first thing I would say is, unless you are familiar with that plant and you really know what it looks like when it's underwatered, I would not water that plant for quite some time. So this one I got, it's probably been almost a month ago that I got this one. And I got it, like I said, from the same store that I got this one, like also a non-nursery. And it's been doing just fine. The other one, like I said, was damaged before I got it. I don't think I was paying close enough attention, or I just deceived myself into thinking that it would actually be healthy. There were a bunch of succulents around it that were dying. This one looked okay, so I decided to go for it. So if you get one from a non-nursery or even from a nursery, a lot of times, I would unpot it, like we talked about earlier, let it dry out. And one of the great things about unpotting it and removing the original soil is that you can actually see what the roots look like. So here, these are pretty healthy roots. You can see they're really thick. Just trying to think of anything else on that. They're thick, they're large, they're not dark, they're not brown or kind of dried up. I have not actually taken this one out of its pot. Let me see, let it. Okay, so you can kind of, I don't know if you'll be able to see that super well because apparently my phone is on focus. These, I think the nuance difference between these and the other one is probably going to be really difficult to see on the camera. These actually don't look terrible, but they are very flat and they're very dried up. And dried up roots is not inherently bad, but when they're really flat like that, they have a hard time absorbing water. And usually when they get deflated like that, it's because there's an area that's rotted out somewhere. And so it's not picking up soil from, or excuse me, it's not picking up water from like the main root system. It's not connected to the plant like it should be. So my bet is down in the middle there, we have some like virtually non-existent roots. They're just like little black threads. And if you see that, if you unpot your succulent and you see really, really thin or dark roots where they look compressed, I would rip those off. So like Joe talked about, is it okay to remove them? I would much rather remove roots that I think don't look healthy and force the succulent to put out roots of its own than to leave on roots that are damaged or rotting, because that starts to cause just a cycle of problems for the plant. So unpot it and let it dry out for a day or two, put it in a new mix. I'd still wait for a little while. I usually like to wait at least a week after I buy new succulents before I plant them. If I don't trust the source, so like a lot of the succulents that I buy online, I'll usually water those within a couple days of purchasing, because I know the sources that I'm buying from online are taking good care of the succulents. The local stores where I'm buying them from, I have no idea. I don't know how they're taking care of them. So I will usually unpot, let them dry out, and then repot them, wait a few more days, and then water again after like a week or two. I also personally tend to really err on the side of underwatering succulents, because it's so much easier to revive an underwatered succulent than an overwatered succulent. Once some of these like signs of rot set in, it can be really, really difficult to revive a plant, and a lot of times it's just not possible at all. So yeah, unpot it, just kind of examine it and see what you see. A great option for you too, if you're not sure if it looks healthy or not, you're all invited to join our Succulent Lovers Club. So it's an online group. We meet virtually and we have 2 succulent tea parties every month where you can get on and ask questions live. I was gonna say live like this, but it's actually a Zoom call, so you can see people, ask questions, and chat. Joe is teaching a workshop for us this month on, oh my gosh, I'm gonna say it wrong, on acrylic pouring, so that you can do really cool painting styles on concrete pots. It's gonna be awesome. And then this is like super secret news. The club doesn't even know this. So we are actually gonna be doing an amazing event in the Succulent Lovers Club in September. We're hoping to have about 10 guest speakers come. Most of them will probably be names or companies that you're familiar with, and we're gonna have them all come speak throughout the course of September. Again, that'll all be happening in the Succulent Lovers Club. There should be a link in the description to the video. If not, you can just go to succulentsandsunshine.com/club to get all the info there. But there's also a community aspect of it too, so you can post pictures and get feedback from the Succulents and Sunshine team and other lovely members of the club. So yeah, definitely recommend that. Learning how to identify and recognize signs of problems is really, really, really helpful in keeping your succulents alive. And asking people for input and getting suggestions is a great way to learn. Or learning from pictures that other people post is also nice, because then you don't have to have the sad experience yourself. You can just learn from someone else. So all right, with that, we're going to finish up by drawing a winner for today's Snappy Pot Mystery Box. And our winner is Jules P. So Jules, send me a message, support@succulentsandsunshine.com. Send me your address and we will ship you a box, a Snappy Pots Mystery Box. And then the rest of you, because anyone who's commented in the chat, you'll be entered to win one of 4 other mystery boxes that we'll give away for this video. And if anyone is watching the replay afterward, go ahead and leave a comment and you'll also be entered to win. So I'm going to do the drawing for those on Monday. So there's going to be a total of 5 videos, and leave a comment on all 5 videos or join live and participate in the chat. And you'll be entered to win a mystery box for each video. So we're giving away a total of 5 mystery boxes per video, 25 total. It's gonna be super fun. So tomorrow we are for reals talking about pottery, and then on Friday we'll be talking about watering and signs of over and under watering and all that good stuff. So it's gonna be great. Thank you all for hopping on with me today. It's been super fun, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow.